Well, it was another shorter episode this week, the events of which may have been kind of predictable depending on who you talk to, but spoiler warning if you haven't seen the episode just yet, I'm not going to be showing the episode or clips from it in this video, just going over the events of the episode and analyzing it based on that. I'll leave a link down below to Rooster Teeth First so you guys can go there and support the series that we all love. Now, this episode starts off, we see in the Argus control room where everyone's still fighting the mech, but we see that a red blip starts appearing on the radar. That still isn't put down yet, because obviously Blake and Yang are occupied dealing with Adam, but red blips are appearing, and it appears as though the soldiers are all doing their job by cheering on Cordovin instead of monitoring the radar, looking for any enemies to appear. But cuts back to Cordovin actually fighting, and Oscar is actually seeming to be more of the strategist than John in this case, because he finds the weakness of the mech itself. He notices that the cannon, well, when it goes to fire the dust, it locks in a dust cartridge. But for the rockets, it pops out. So if you could sneak a bullet in there and blow up the missiles while they're in the actual loading chamber, you could blow up the rocket. And Cordovin, being in the mech, she actually gets a call from the base. So apparently someone was doing their job and they noticed fairly quickly, so good on the soldiers. But Cordovin, on the other hand, not so much. She's easily egged on by Maria, who picked up RWBY, and so Cordovin goes to fire the rockets, and RWBY is just lined up right to fire at them. But I will give credit to Cordovin. She's made it to her position by having military experience, and she noticed immediately what they were trying to do, zoomed in and saw RWBY aiming to fire. So she lowered the rockets just in time to avoid the bullet hitting. And she actually blasted the ship with an electricity beam that actually worked. That ship is very sturdy. It took an electrical blast in the first time we saw the mech, at least it grazed it, and then at the end of the last episode it took that rocket blast that the mech caught the rocket and threw it back. Still not sure on the physics on that one. But then this electricity blast, a little bit more head-on, and that was enough to bring the ship down. Crow ends up running over to see if RWBY's okay, and RWBY, after just getting out of the ship, is going to confront the mech. Crow obviously tries to stop her, but is now realizing that he doesn't have that power anymore. She's become her own huntress. She doesn't need to follow Crow's lead anymore. She's a leader in and of herself. So Crow lets her go, and she goes to confront Cordovin. And they have little conversation there where Cordovin says this is what you get for going against Atlas, but RWBY's not apologizing for anything. Blaming Cordovin for her actions, actually, by saying, "You forced us to this. You wouldn't listen to us. You've been arrogant with your power, that you think yourself above others," which she does. It does seem like Cordovin actually does have some intention to protect the people of Argus, but she also holds herself above the others, thinking that Atlas is better. But either way, RWBY's plan actually works and eggs Cordovin on to aim the cannon directly at her. Everyone, of course, starts freaking out, but this being RWBY's plan, and also she definitely listened to Oscar, because the second that the cannon started charging up, RWBY actually jumps into the cannon. And then we realize, well, Oscar had said, the rockets, the missiles, yeah, they pop up, but the dust locks in. The wording was specific there, because once she starts the firing sequence, she can't abort it. Maybe a design flaw, but I doubt it, considering this mech is meant for fighting large Grimm with not human-like intelligence. And so, one personnel unit going into the rocket and firing a single bullet into the firing mechanism set it off and absolutely wrecked the overall cannon. Obviously it was loaded with electric dust, but that blew the cartridges at the side, which were the earth rock dust and the ice dust as well, so that arm was completely frozen and now completely useless. However, though, with that blast, RWBY did take a pretty big hit, and her aura was, it seemed to be either very well damaged or deactivated, so that might play a part in the next episode, but she landed in Crow's arms, she's okay, and at the end of this little segment, the ship kind of hovered a little bit, so that ship took 3 hits. The cannon took 1. The ship is still moving, whereas the cannon is dead. I know the cannon obviously has a little bit more intricate workings with it to be able to fire the dust at that caliber, but still, you'd think they'd want the main fighting weapon of the base to be just a bit more sturdy. Anyways, after this little thing, it cuts back to Blake and Yang versus Adam, and Adam's going off. It's just like, oh, 2-1 again. Do you really think you can win? Remember what happened to Beacon? It's not gonna be so easy. And, well, they start fighting, and it looks like Blake and Yang have the upper hand. However, Blake does take a pretty big hit, gets flown off the cliff into the cliffside wall, and takes a pretty big hit, where it seems like her aura got completely deactivated as well. And as she's hanging there, it ends up being kind of 1v1 Yang versus Adam. And Adam, realizing this, kind of eggs Yang on, saying, do you think you're faster than you were at Beacon? Implying, well, do you think you're actually going to be able to avoid the sword strike? And Yang still has a little bit of the jitters, but she ends up holding her own quite well and keeping Adam's attention as we notice Blake is climbing up the cliff face behind him. And Yang, this volume, definitely shows that she's learned to use her semblance a lot better than before, because this time she waits for Adam to charge up an attack, then uses her semblance to help block the attack and absorb the power so she can get a bit more powerful. In the dust cloud that resulted from that attack, Adam goes to strike her down, but Yang, with her now metallic hand, can block it without, cutting her hand open. So she catches Wilt and blasts Adam in the gut, where he actually releases Wilt and goes flying and leaves kind of a crater on the ground. So good on you, Yang. You're stronger than you were before. Besides, when her hair is on fire like that, the animation style, incredible. Loved it. But Adam, not too happy now that he doesn't have Wilt, and Yang just tosses Wilt off the cliff. Adam, kind of desperate to get his weapon back, runs over, but this was all planned because Blake was waiting for him, and she jumps up, uppercuts him, and sends him flying backwards. And then as, well, we notice that Gamble Shroud, or the shards of Gamble Shroud, is lying on the ground. Blake and Yang are on either side of Adam. They charge, and they get to the shards of Gamble Shroud first, and as we've all kind of expected throughout this volume, Adam gets stabbed. We didn't know exactly how he was going to die, but it certainly looks like at this point he did, because Blake stabbed him through the center of the chest, Yang stabbed him through the back, and it came out his chest as well. He stumbles over and falls off of the cliff. Now, one thing to note, Yang and Blake did pull the shards of Gamble Shroud out, so maybe Blake's weapon is going to be repaired, but Adam falls off the cliff into the water, so we don't actually see that he's definitively dead. We don't see the light leave his eyes or anything like that, but after Adam falls off, Blake drops to the ground crying, because I can't imagine how hard that would have been for her. Regardless of what Adam has become, the monster that he is, she knew he had to be put down, but there was also a time where they were close, that they relied on each other, that Adam at least loved her, and I'm guessing Blake might have been in love with him as well. I don't think we've necessarily got confirmation that they were a couple, but there was definitely a strong emotional bond between the two of them, and a lot of trust. So that must have been incredibly hard. And the episode ends off, Cordovin, with the rocket being weighed down by the rock and ice, is in the water, and she finally contacts the base now. Get all the troops out here to deal with all these children. But the base simply says, we've been trying to contact you for a while now. There's a giant Grimm on its way, the Leviathan, which looks exactly like a kaiju. If you've ever seen Pacific Rim, that's pretty much what we're going to be facing here. And as a bonus, another Sphinx with a whole bunch of griffins or manticores, sorry, are coming in from the other side of Argus. So, with the episode ending there, pretty much exactly what we predicted, and I don't know how well Argus is going to survive after this, because all of the events of this episode, we pretty much predicted in the last couple episodes. We've been thinking that Adam was going to die for pretty much this entire volume. However, I will say this ends up being another scenario similar to the end of Volume 5. We saw Cinder be frozen and drop off the cliff. At that point, I had hoped that Cinder was dead. That didn't happen, and this time I'm hoping Adam is actually alive, which is probably going to mean that he's going to end up dead, but I have a feeling he might actually be dead in this case, because 2 holes, one like through the chest, granted where they were positioned, it might have missed his heart, but he's gonna bleed out pretty darn fast in that situation. And but yeah, we pretty much called that Adam was going to die this volume. Again, don't know if he's actually dead, but once I saw the mech as well, I pointed out that's kind of overkill for just a anti-personnel unit. No. That is, and especially with last episode, John saying it looks like it's supposed to be used to deal with giant aquatic Grimm. Well, hint, hint, that's what ended up happening and disabling the cannon. Now they've lost their only major defense against that. So what exactly are they going to do against this Leviathan? Not exactly sure. I think this volume's only supposed to have 13 episodes, so everything's going to have to be wrapped up in the next episode. I'm hoping that that's wrong and that there's 14 episodes. That would make a lot more sense, considering we haven't seen Neo and Cinder show up yet. I'm kind of starting to wonder if they're going to show up and find Adam bleeding out at, like, the riverside or something like that, and they're going to end up saving him or something along those lines. Because if they're just going to show up and be defeated or be driven off or steal the relic and get away in one episode and there's not going to be any build up to that, I'm just going to be frank here. That's not enough time with Neo on screen. Let's be real. We need more of that. And one episode's not going to do it. Now, if they end up showing up and they leave it off as a cliffhanger, or maybe they hijack a ride on whatever ship Team RWBY and everyone else is going to use to get to Atlas, maybe that's going to end up with what happens, and then they're going to actually have the overall conflict in Atlas, where they'll have to deal with Cinder, Neo, maybe Adam if they pick him up along the way. I kind of doubt it though. And then Hazel and Tyrion. That would make for an interesting, or Watts and Tyrion. We haven't seen Hazel at all this volume yet, so wonder what'll happen with that. Or no, we did see Hazel. He was actually at Salem's headquarters, but still. We need to see what's going to end up happening with this overall Grimm and how they're going to get out of that. The amount of fighters that they have, like, I mean, I know the military is there, they have a military base, but they just lost their biggest weapon. So I don't know how exactly they're going to deal with this giant Grimm, because there's not going to be anything that's going to be able to penetrate its thick hide. Like, sure, RWBY has sniper bullets, and they could use blades and everything, but assuming that this giant Grimm is not just literally a giant Grimm, it has some extra special powers. Like, the Sphinx, for example, was able to shoot fireballs. The giant sea dragon, the Sea Fei Long, I believe it was called, was able to shoot electricity out of its mouth. So assuming that this giant Grimm, which looks like a kaiju, could also do something else, they're going to need some way to defend against it and some way to take it down, which at this point, I don't really know. Frankly, they could probably just ram a few of those little ships into it because they're a lot more sturdy than the mech, or maybe they're just going to use the mech to punch it out if they can find a way to lift the arm. Anyways, we're going to have to see what ends up happening with that. I'm not really sure what to expect for the finale. I'm wondering how much of Argus is actually going to be left after this all happens, but we're going to have to see, because there were a lot of manticores and at least one Sphinx in the sky over Argus. So we're going to have to see what ends up happening. One thing I will say, though, whether it happens in the finale or whether it happens next volume, Blake and Yang are definitely going to be getting closer because they're going to be there for each other and everything, but they are now going to have to deal with the fact that they have taken a life. Whether Adam ends up being alive or if he actually is dead, which, again, I'm kind of thinking he is dead, although I hope he's alive, they're going to have to deal with the fact they've actually straight up killed someone, because they haven't done that at this point in the overall RWBY world. They've fought Grimm, they've fought other people, but they've never straight up killed someone before. And especially for Blake being with the emotional connection that she once had to Adam, it's going to be more than just an episode for her to get over it. At least it should be. This shouldn't be something that's just glossed over. This is something that they actually need to deal with, because this is going to cause emotional trauma. The amount that she was shaken up after that happened, she couldn't stand anymore. She dropped to her knees crying. She is absolutely shaken up, and she needs comfort. And Yang's going to need this as well, because even though she still had the jitters while fighting Adam, and yeah, maybe being able to beat him could help her get over that, the fact still remains, she hasn't killed anyone before either. And they need to be there for each other, and hopefully everyone else will be there for them as well, as I'm guessing they're going to be. So I'm interested to see how that's going to go, and I really hope that it's not glossed over. I don't think it will be, but we'll see what ends up happening next episode and next volume. I'm hoping that there's 2 episodes left. If there's only one, that just doesn't seem like enough for me, unless it's going to be at least 25 minutes long, like episode 3 was when we found out Salem's backstory. I'm hoping, but we'll see what ends up happening. I'm guessing that the Grimm are probably going to be defeated or driven off, because I don't think people are going to want to abandon Argus, though I don't know what defenses they have in Argus to defend against this, because a majority of the base was actually this mech. So with that being the case, and the mech having its cannon down, unless they can somehow free the cannon, but I doubt it. Even if they could get the rock and ice off, I'm assuming that the dust canisters had to actually explode to cover the cannon like it did, so I don't think the cannon's going to be functional in any way, shape, or form. And therefore the missiles won't either. I don't know how they're going to beat it. They have nothing to be able to take down that giant Leviathan. The only thing I can think of is maybe reinforcements from Atlas itself will get here, although I don't know how, because there's going to be no way to get communication out to Atlas that they're in trouble. And I don't think Atlas is close enough for them to see all the way over there, because when the Grimm was walking over, you couldn't see any shoreline behind it, so I don't know how they're going to take that thing down, to be honest, unless someone's going to do the stereotypical jump inside the Grimm to tear it away from the inside. But, you know, if they did that, that would support my theory even more that Torchwick's alive, because that would mean that person could survive inside of a Grimm, but I don't think that's what's actually going to happen. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, what you expect for the finale, how much you were able to predict about what was going to happen this episode. I mean, most of the events were fairly predictable when you think about it, but that doesn't mean they're any less impactful, because this does mean a lot, and now has put them in the position that they're in, where all these Grimm are around, and not really much of a way to defend themselves. So let me know what you guys think, what you're expecting for the finale, or if not the finale, the next 2 episodes, hopefully. So I look forward to seeing your comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't. See you guys in the next one.